There's literally no reason why this shouldn't work. It should work. I don't know if I can be bothered to set up everything. So I'm here at my janky setup. I have my dying laptop on my bed. I'm kneeling in front of a relatively good microphone, and I have my bedding as a noise suppressor, I guess is what you call it. I'm here today because I want to talk about a video that I stumbled upon, and it is about religion, so it's kind of up my street. I figured that just doing a comment was lazy, and I wanted to do a proper response. It kind of also gives me something to do. So the video in question is a video it's not right. It's not right at all. Okay, so I stumbled upon this video online, and it's by a YouTuber who currently has 2.25,000 subscribers. So I'm punching up, basically, quite significantly punching up. You know, I'm a man of God, so I'm gonna like and subscribe to your video. Just because I'm polite. There we go. The creator's name is Godless SnowShoe, and it's just like Cosmic Skeptic, but better in every way. I really like this name. And the pronouns that he chooses to use are he, him. So that's how we're going to refer to hhim in this video. Okay, let's actually get in the meat. Let's get into the meat and potatoes is the sentence I tried to say. Anyway, let's go. Let's ignore this.
So in my last video, I discussed some of the philosophy behind why I'm an anti-theist, as well as went over some of the beliefs held by a contemporary philosopher who I share these beliefs with. But today, I want to address one of the most common questions I get asked on any anti-theist video I make, which is, what's actually harmful about religion? So before I continue, I want to give the little disclaimer and explanation of anti-theism that I always do at the start of these videos. Anti-theism is not a belief that religion should be banned. It is the belief that religion is inherently harmful.
I'm going to start with a really nitpicky point, just to be an arsehole. Just doing this to be an arsehole. I mean, I would argue that a better definition of anti-theism would be somebody who's diametrically opposed to a theistic worldview or religiosity in general. It's just a belief that religion should be opposed in various different ways. Everything from Christopher Hitchens to the Communist Party. I'm going to get smashed for that one.
Religion, or more broadly belief without proof, creates philosophical and epistemic inconsistency.
Awful lot of beliefs are held without proof. This is because there's a not insignificant difference between evidence and proof. Evidence shows something to be more or less likely true. Proof shows a claim to be true. That doesn't mean that proof completely negates any doubt whatsoever, because normative anti-realism is really annoying. But it pretty much does elevate it to certainly true. An example would be we have sufficient evidence for a belief that the world is round, but we don't have proof that the world is round until I myself go up and look. There's a distinction between proof, evidence, and sufficient evidence.
Creates philosophical and epistemic inconsistency.
Still more consistent than my audio. I hate sibilants so much.
To hold a belief in any religion, you must lower what standard of evidence must be met before you choose to believe something.
Firstly, presuppositional fallacy. Secondly, are we talking about world religions irrespective of culture or time, irrespective of all historical context? Now, the length of time that people have held a belief does not mean that that belief is true, but it does go to show that this statement has just been made.
To hold a belief in any religion, you must lower what standard of evidence must be met before you choose to believe something.
Is at the very least a massive overgeneralization, because it would entirely depend on what the specific claims of the religion are.
You must lower what standard of evidence.
When Godless SnowShoe talks about lowering the standard of evidence, he's linking to a belief called extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The issue with this is that atheists and anti-theists cannot define what an extraordinary claim is, nor can they define what extraordinary evidence for that extraordinary extraordinary claim would be. So when we're talking about the eyewitness testimony for the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and a Christian brings up the reliability of the Gospels, this has to be undermined, because even if it was true, an atheist would argue that that's not extraordinary evidence, even though it is, in principle, extraordinary evidence that the Gospels have survived with such level of accuracy given how old they are. A more intellectually honest statement would be extraordinary claims require good evidence. So an extraordinary claim is that Laika the dog was sent into space in 1957. That would require good evidence.
There's no evidence for any religious belief.
I mean, listen to Richard Dawkins talk about extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence and you'll get my point.
What would persuade you?
Well, I'm starting to think nothing would. Which in a way goes against the grain, because I've always paid lip service to the view that a scientist should change his mind when evidence is forthcoming. Trouble is, I can't think what that evidence would look like.
Dawkins shows in his reasoning that it's actually him lowering his standard of evidence in order to accommodate his belief that the supernatural is not possible. I find that it's often atheists raising the bar for evidence rather than Christians lowering their standard. Then we get on to this other sort of claim, which is there's no evidence at all, full stop. There's no evidence at all, full stop, which is just flawed.
Or the theology in itself being harmful, such as original sin that creates self-loathing and fear.
So I was going to go into the Compendium of Theology, Thomas Aquinas' Compendium of Theology, and I was going to explain like the essential essence of God's good nature and privation theory of evil, but I'm not going to do that. I think what I will do instead is I'll point out that this is actually an internal debate within Christianity, and I will let William Lane Craig, who I'm sure Godless SnowShoe has a lot to say about, kind of just briefly explain this. He does it a lot better than I could.
Christians differ in their view of original sin. So if you have reservations about this, you will be in very good company. It's not as though this is a cardinal doctrine of Christianity. The Catholic Church holds to the doctrine of original sin, but Eastern Orthodoxy, for example, does not. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, it's believed that we all bear a corrupted nature as a result of sin's entry through Adam into the human race, but we don't hold or bear original guilt. We're not condemned for something we didn't do. In Protestant theology, although Reformed theology holds to the doctrine of original sin, many Arminians do not. Many would think that it was simply through the fall of man that sin entered into the world, but that we do not carry the guilt of Adam's original sin.
The only other thing I'd say is that original sin is not something that we have just to make people feel unhappy, and it's weird to call it harmful in that sense. We have it because we believe it's an evidenceable part of humans. It's something that humans seem to have inherently. Young children seem to exhibit quite natural evil. We believe that it's actually an evidenceable thing. You can look at humans and you can look at human behavior and you can come to a conclusion that actually, perhaps, they lack some goodness. It's not a total deprivation of any goodness in humans. That's something that I should make very clear. I see a lot of atheists kind of take original sin and they just pluck it out and they're like, look, original sin's bad. And they don't take into account the fullness of Christian theology and the fact that Christians solve the problem that original sin posits. Christopher Hitchens pointed this out. In fact, Christopher Hitchens pointed out that Christians have original sin's really bad, and then we kind of have to make up for it with the atonement, which is a ridiculous proposition, a complete bastardization of everything we believe in. But, I mean, we do go on to solve it in Christ, who is the ultimate federal head.
It's much more common to see religious people hold beliefs that contradict modern medical science.
We can agree. I said that sentence too quickly. I'm dying. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a legitimate criticism against a religion, so I don't necessarily disagree with its premise. I've had way too much Monster. It's getting very late. It's nearly 2 o'clock in the morning.
Things such as anti-vaxxers, alternative healing such as essential oils and crystals.
Leave my essential oils alone. They're essential.
Obviously, these things are harmful in that they cause physical bodily harm by denying available medical treatment.
That doesn't show that religion is inherently, intrinsically, fundamentally harmful. It shows that certain people who are religious hold extreme views, but that's not unique to people who are religious. This general claim about religiosity of any kind doesn't take into account the difference between intrinsic religiosity, which is generally associated with good things according to the data, and extrinsic religiosity, which is generally associated with the bad things according to the data. So it's a very wide generalization.
To move on, this next point is almost the exact opposite of Pascal's wager.
Oh no, not Pascal's wager, please. Don't make me defend Pascal's wager.
Pretty much all religions place some level of arbitrary restrictions on victimless, harmless actions.
This claim I need to take quite seriously, so we're going to do this a bit more monotone.
Arbitrary.
This is a very, very serious allegation, because what Godless SnowShoe is doing is saying that there's no rational foundation to a large number, if not all, religious beliefs. That is a problem, so we are going to go through this a bit more seriously. And I've drunk too much Monster, so I keep burping in my mouth.
Pretty much all religions place some level of arbitrary restrictions on victimless, harmless actions.
If someone has a good, rational basis for a belief or for a claim, it is by definition not arbitrary, because arbitrary will be based on random personal choice or whimsical decision making. Let's use sex outside of marriage as an example for what I mean. Remember that the claim that Godless SnowShoe is making is that these beliefs, these types of beliefs, are arbitrary.
Not having sex before marriage.
Fornication, which is the sin of having sex outside of marriage, is wrong because it doesn't fulfill structure. Christians state that the morality of sex is derived from a threefold system. If sex is not procreative in concept, intimate in concept, or structural in concept, the sex is immoral. So the theological basis for this belief is ancient, it's very, very old, but the secular rationalization for this belief really originates with Aristotle. It's actually the Christians who added this idea onto Aristotle's work that intimacy was important and that sex is relational. Now remember that the argument that I'm making is not that this is necessarily true. If you disagree with me on this premise, that's fine. My premise here is that Godless SnowShoe's claim that these beliefs are arbitrary is a fallacious claim.
Hey! Do you have any idea what's going to happen now?
But the point, regardless, is that religion forces people into making choices they would not have made otherwise.
Yes, but you beg the question by assuming first that most of those are harmful. Remember that an individual can benefit from order within a community, even if they have to enact some discipline on personal freedoms in their life.
And where, since you believe that this person is plausibly going to be seen again in the afterlife if you follow your religion and get to heaven,
you've woken up the inner Protestant in me with that statement. Maybe the inner evangelical in me. So Christians have this really, really bad habit of saying, oh, this earth is not my home, I'm going to heaven, heaven is where I'll be happy and there's freedom. No. It's a stopgap. It's a brilliant stopgap. It's nice in heaven. In fact, it's much nicer than here. But it's not my home. Earth is my home. I was made for Earth, and God will renew Earth and free Earth from moral evil and natural evil.
In regards to coping with the unknown, this essentially boils down to, God of the Gaps is good because I'd rather have a made-up answer than no answer. Because I'd rather have a made-up answer than no answer.
I relented on Pascal's wager. You relent on this. God of the Gaps was formulated by a Christian. For Christians. We don't use God of the Gaps to just explain away things. It was specifically formulated, or at least formalized, by a guy called Henry Drummond. The intention was not to say you can't ever present a metaphysical theory for anything ever. Rather, it was to say there are certain natural processes that we don't understand, but that doesn't mean that we should insert God into them. There's also usually an implication when an atheist talks about God of the Gaps. There's usually an implication that science is going to come along and sort the problem out in some way. Separate fallacy called Science of the Gaps. Godless SnowShoe is not directly saying that here. However, I do want to briefly bring it up.
That is America's only contribution to Western civilization.
It's not better to make up an answer in the face of discomfort.
Life does not come from non-life. There are no examples of life originating from something that is not alive. That's not just us making up something to fill the gaps in our knowledge. Rather, we're making an active inference from a set of facts. it's kind of a bastardization to say those Christians are just making up things to make themselves feel better.
And learning to be okay with saying I don't know often progresses into an I don't know, so let's find out.
I don't claim to know God's plan, but in the end, I'm just saying I am it. You're gonna do nothing.
Science was born out of 3 main philosophical points. 1, that the world is rational and able to be understood. 2, that we are rational beings and able to understand. And 3, that those previous 2 statements are good and that therefore it's good to pursue knowledge. The unfortunate reality for Godless SnowShoe here is that those 3 principles behind the scientific revolution were Christian principles. Now, this is a much more nuanced argument than I can actually get into here, and the video is already running quite long, but essentially Christians expect to find ordered systems in the world because they believe that the world was created by an ordered God. This is not what you'd expect to find if all that existed was matter and energy. Because Christians expect to find a rational world, and that rational world reflects their God, there is a huge incentive for Christians to go out and discover things about the world. So when Godless SnowShoe says, I don't know, so let's find out, as if Christians don't do that.
I don't even know where to start with you. I mean, do you even know who you're talking to?
I hope that this suit served as a useful overview of my own perspective of the topic. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
And shouldn't blow in the mic, but relax. We're gonna end there. I think that's a good place to end. I want to make sure that this video, even though I want to be very clear with what I believe, doesn't come across as, you know, aggressive or confrontational. I think that the video is really well put together. I think he's got some good points, and they've given me a lot to think about, which is important. I'm getting very tired now. It's very late. You can see the fists. You can see my fists punching upwards vigorously. Maybe I've bitten off more than I can chew. That wasn't a furry joke, by the way. I don't want to push my luck. I've already pushed my luck. It's already pushed.